there are two ladies, so nevertheless the time is only 12 minutes. Mrs. Rajapaksha and Mrs. Gunasekara. These two ladies will, there's only one sitting here, isn't it? The other one will come also, yes, I see it. They have both a Bachelor of Architecture from Muratuwa University with a 5 years degree, and their interest is one in sustainable architecture, the other one in near zero emission work in architecture, I guess, and we will hear their presentation now on a natural landscape as a tool of archiving adaptive comfort and the impact of a multi-story residential building in tropics. So we talk about comfort, which has to do with something with building physics, I guess. It's your turn, please.
Thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. We are going to talk about the landscape as a tool in achieving adaptive comfort, a study based on multi-storied residential buildings in tropical climates. And as introduced, this is a study related in the field of architecture. And like we all know, architecture has several specified fields like urban design, conservation, material technology, and one, climate-sensitive design. And this is specifically based on climate-sensitive design. Why studying this climate-sensitive design is because the field is misinterpreted, and the research is less. And we are concentrating on this climate design because ultimately it will be our future. And talking about architecture, we focus on buildings and residential buildings, because residential buildings is the place we all at the end go seeking comfortability. And multi-storied buildings, because with the urbanization and the economical changes in our country, we all know people tend to move into cities, and the most common issue has become dwelling. And we have started growing vertically, building vertical dwelling units. So the multi-storied buildings came up like that, and also it is an advantage for our research, because we can study the thermal behavior of each vertical level when we select multi-storied buildings. And the reason of selecting the tropical climate, obviously, as Sri Lankans, we belong to the tropical climate, and the research in tropical climate is not enough as researchers. We have to admit that. And talking about this climate-sensitive design is at the end, it talk about the thermal comfort. And thermal comfort it differs. Like in cold climates, people seek for heat component. In our countries like us, we seek for cooling comfort. And ultimately, talking about this thermal comfort, we have different strategies in achieving this thermal comfort. And one acceptable method is this usage of adaptive comfort. Adaptive comfort, if I describe briefly, it is the psychological adaptation of a person to overcome a physically uncomfortable situation which has been accepted through the standards. As an example, if we take the Australian standards, the standard might say this particular temperature is physically uncomfortable, but due to several mental and psychological reasons, people tend to survive by adapting to that particular temperature. That is the adaptive comfort. And we are using the landscape as a tool in describing this adaptive comfort. And we all know landscape can be categorized into two, soft landscape and hard landscape. And people normally misunderstand landscape as trees, but it's not like that. As you can see in these images, the hard landscape can happen without the trees, while the soft landscape is more about greenery, yes. And you will see the relationship with these landscape systems with our selection of case studies, because it has these both components, hard landscape and soft landscape.
And yes, our research is focused on residential buildings, On residential buildings, especially we focused on high-rise residential buildings because less attention has been paid to multi-story residential buildings in terms of thermal comfort researches. When we discuss about the domestic buildings, it is very important because ultimately our residence is where we live in daytime and the night time, so we need the we mostly need the thermal comfort in our houses, residences. And yeah, multi-story buildings in urban context, we know our houses can be ventilated and lighted mechanically, either naturally, but as climate-sensitive architects, we promote naturally ventilated and naturally lighted buildings. So you can identify from this chart that building consumes around 40% of the energy consumed by the building. Out of that 40%, 22% consumed by residential buildings. These amounts of energy is consumed for cooling buildings and in tropical climates to cool the buildings and to gain light. In the other cold climates, they need this energy to heat up their buildings and to gain light. So it conveys that it's very important to identify this energy consumption, the relationship between the buildings and the energy consumption. And our method, when we move to our methodology, the objective of the methodology is to identify the prevailing physical thermal behavior of the selected research area and compare them with the experience while using the dwelling units. Because although we measure the buildings and say this is comfortable or this is uncomfortable as a physical measurement, ultimately the experience of the people who live in that building is the most important thing. So the case study selection, we selected the case study, a multi-story residential apartment from Dematakoda Mihindusenpura housing scheme, which is a 10-storied residential apartment, and it consists of each and every block consists of, you can see from this slide, each and every block consists of middle courtyards in those blocks. Additionally, they have outer balconies. Then the house, then they have continuous interactive corridor in the middle of the courtyard, around the courtyard. So from the middle two pictures, you can see the hard landscape within the middle courtyard and how the continuous corridors interact with the middle courtyard. Yeah, the field study within that selected case study area, we did it in two phases. The first phase is it was a kind of pilot study to identify the characteristics or the patterns of the thermal behavior in the selected case study area. So we measured, we focused mainly for climate indexes, air temperature, humidity, and wind velocity. We measured those three indexes for 48 hours. And for the first investigation, we selected 8 houses from selected 8 floor levels. And then identifying patterns, thermal patterns, and the relation between the wind velocity and the relative humidity, we did another investigation, which is mentioned as second investigation. The purpose of the second investigation was to confirm the results of the first investigation. So we did another air temperature, humidity, and wind velocity measurements again. And additionally, in the second investigation, we conducted questionnaire survey as well, which focused on PMV values, effective thermal comfort, and neutral temperature as well. And we focused on housewives in the questionnaire survey because they are the most occupied. The housewives are the people who live within the house mostly in the daytime and the nighttime.
And justification of selecting the study month, like using the empirical evidence, we focus that March appears to be the month which has the maximum variation of wind velocity and the maximum variation of temperature and humidity. So that became the month of our research. And this is the phase 1, our analysis chart, which is the temperature analysis of 8 floors. And you can see the pinkish dotted line is the ambient temperature, and the red line is the 10th floor temperature variation, which is the highest. And the lowest temperature variation was it occurred at the 6th floor because it became a middle level. And you can see the highlighted 2 areas. The maximum temperature is been recorded between 12:30 to 2:30 noon p.m. And like as a backup, as a support for our research, like we identified the standard comfortable temperature range using the psychrometric chart. The highlighted area shows the standard comfortable temperature range, which is 22 Celsius degrees to 30.6 Celsius degrees. And this is the temperature behavioral graph in a horizontal level. We did this for 8 floors, but this is the example from the 10th floor, which is the critical floor. And you can see the maximum. You have at some points you have your area in comfortable zone, while in the around 8:30 until 5:30 p.m. You have an uncomfortable temperature behavior in your house. And the inner corridor appears to be the temperature with the medium range, and the outer balcony becomes the highest temperature variation with the highest values. And the measured temperature ranged from 24.5 Celsius to 34 Celsius, while our comfortable standard temperature was, as I previously mentioned, was 22 to 30.6. And we use the questionnaire survey as a support. Like you can see the questions which we have focused to gain the idea about their habitat in the house, the way they behave, the way they dress, even because it affects the PMV value. And what
Please come to the summary.
What we ultimately try to take this is the PMV measurement index to get an outcome of their psychological thermal comfort. And
this is the analysis of the questionnaire survey. You can simply see we have arranged simply it that the light blue color in this graph we have shown that ground floor, 3rd floor, 7th floor, and 10th floor levels, how the dwellers behave within the thermally critical period. So we can see in every floor, the most of the people gather in continuous corridors during the most critical time, thermally most critical time period. And in the initial stages, we accepted that it would be in the other way, because the most pleasing the most pleasing
Please come to the end.
views and sceneries are from towards the outside.
And concluding, the research outcome became something unexpected for us because we initially thought the aspect of landscape, the visual placement will become the aspect of this thermal comfortability, the adaptive comfort, but at the end we came up with the conclusion like the socio-cultural background of those people has changed their psychological effect of adapting themselves in a thermally uncomfortable situation. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your interesting talk. I'm sure we will have even more questions than what you all told now, but unfortunately there's no time left to do questions now. Thanks again for this, and we directly continue with the next speaker.